Hi, merry meet. I'm Aislin and this is Ask Aislin. So tonight I have a lot to talk about. I'm here to talk about the last quarter moon as well as different ways that you can find balance, especially during this time. So I've got a lot to cover tonight. I'll just dive right in. So this is the last quarter moon actually taking place today, sometimes called the third quarter moon, and in fact these words are often used interchangeably. And I just wanted to start by clearing up any confusion about the last quarter moon and the third quarter moon as far as whether they are to be considered a phase or to be considered one day. So there's two different ways of looking at it. So on this actual day today, we are halfway between the full moon and the next new moon. So this makes us at the third quarter. So if you think about the phases of the moon, when we cycle through it, we can divide it into four pieces, four quarters, and therefore when we hit this day, we are 3/4 of the way around the through the lunar cycle, right? So therefore we call this third quarter. Now we also can call this last quarter because we call the same exact time halfway across the lunar cycle first quarter, right? As soon as we stop, we come out of the new moon to the first quarter, and then we go to the full moon, and then we go to this third quarter, last quarter, and then finally back to the new moon. So now sometimes people they'll use this time and they call it a phase. So what I mean by this is that you technically could call the time period between the full moon and this day right now, this third quarter, we could call that whole period the third quarter. So in some ways it would be like the waning gibbous part of the moon, right? And so we could also call that final quarter, those 7 days from this last quarter, this day today, all the way to the next new moon. We could also call that the fourth quarter or the last quarter. And that would be associated or aligned with the waning crescent. So it doesn't really matter which way you choose to look at it, whether you look at it as phases of 7 days or you look at it just as one specific day. But just kind of be clear, like there's two different ways that people can talk about it. Generally, when witches are referring to third quarter or last quarter, they're usually going to be referring to this exact day, this day that's halfway between the full moon and the next new moon. Okay, so we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about what does it mean now that we're at last quarter. So this is, like I said, we're poised right here between the full moon and the next new moon. So we come through that manifestation phase. We are in the waning phase. We are starting to experience this as waning energy, and we're poised right here in between. We're at this point of balance. So therefore, it is a great time that is aligned with the energy of balance. So looking at our lives, looking to see what's in balance, what seems to be not in balance, this would all be really relevant right now. So there's also this turning inward. So looking inside, reassessing, there may even be some kind of looking backwards towards the past. So what happened in the past? How do we reinterpret what had happened? How can we use that reinterpretation and that new energy to move into the rest of this part of the cycle, right? So we also have this energy that's very similar to the energy that we might feel, for example, at an equinox. So the spring and the fall equinoxes, they're poised right in the middle, right? Between the two solstices. So they create this natural place where we just naturally feel like we want to work on our balance. There's also another time within the daily cycle that you might feel this as well. So those transition times between day and night, so dawn and dusk, those are also good times to work on balance. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't work on balance or find balance at other times. It just means that it's particularly conducive to that energy right now. Okay, so I'm going to spend the remainder of the time talking about what would we do if we wanted to find balance. What are the different ways we could look at it? What are some different practices we could do? And so to open up, I just wanted to mention that there are many different practices and many different ways to find balance. And it all really depends on the system that you're working in. So what I'm going to do right here is offer a bunch of different choices And at the end, I'm going to show you how they're actually quite similar to each other and how you could maybe work with all of them. So the first thing we're going to talk about is elemental balance. So within the body, we are composed of the 4 earthly elements, so earth, fire, air, and water. Now there is the 5th element, spirit. This is usually thought of as like an animating force or an energy that kind of breathes life into everything. So we're not really going to be talking about that element today, mainly talking about the bottom 4, or the earthly elements. So within us, we have all of these. So they're going to be in different compositions. They're going to be in different percentages. And some people will have more earth and less fire, or more water and less air. And it could be any different combination. And you may even find that this changes throughout the year. It might change throughout your lifetime. We'll get into that a little bit more later. But for now, just know that we all have these different compositions. And we are going to start by first talking about the astrological composition. So this is how we can look at the elements based on our astrological charts. So in order to do this, you would first need to have a full birth chart, full natal chart cast. If you don't have one, it's really easy. You can go to many places online and get one for free. I like astro.com. You'll just put in your birth date. You want to make sure you have your time of birth as accurate as possible and the place you were born. Hit enter and it will do all of this work for you. So it is going to show you all of your planets, where all of the planets were and what signs they were located in. So then there's a little bit of work that you have to do. So you want to look at that chart, and most of these charts will have like a little table down at the bottom, and they're going to tell you what signs all of the planets were in, and you are going to do a little tally here. So if the planets are in Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, those are fire signs. So we're going to get a point for fire for each one of those. If any planets are in Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn, those are earth signs, so you would get a point for each of those planets for earth. If you have any planets in Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius, those are the air signs, so those would get you a point for air, any one of those. And then Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces are all the water signs, and they would get you a point for water. Now generally, when we are doing this type of elemental composition, and looking at it this way, we want to give extra points for the sun, for the moon, and for the ascendant, or the rising sign. Now the reason for this is because those signs, they seem to, they relate more to our personality, they are more predominant in the chart, and therefore they get 2 points instead of 1. So if your sun is in Aries, like me, you're going to get 2 points for fire by having that in Aries. Okay, so if you try this, you have some questions, you can always message me and let me know you're having trouble with it, but otherwise do this little exercise if you're interested. And then you're going to, once it's done, then you want to look at it. So what does it look like? Does it look balanced? Does it look like you have fire, air, water, and earth pretty evenly spread out? Or does it feel like you have a lot of one element and not much of another? This is what we want to consider. So for example, in my own chart, I have a ton of fire, I have a good amount of water and some air, and I don't really have much earth. So we're going to talk in a minute about what we do about that. But the one thing to keep in mind is, with the astrological chart, it's not like we can change it. You can't go back and change when you were born or where you were born, right? But what it does offer us is it gives us the power to at least know from that perspective, astrologically, what is the elemental composition. And once we have this knowledge, we can use it to find more balance. Okay, so for example, as in my example where I said that I didn't have much earth, this is important for me to remember, because if I want to find balance, I'm going to want to bring in some more earth practices. So if you look at your own chart and you see, I don't have much water or I don't have much fire, those are the elements that you want to focus on, because at the end of the day, we're trying to find as much balance as we can. Okay, so that's astrologically. Now, there are other ways. I'm going to go kind of quickly through a lot of these. They will lend themselves well to probably a whole segment all on their own. So some of these things I will revisit later, but this is just kind of a broad overview of the different ways that we can look at how to find elemental balance and our elemental compositions. So the next way is through an elemental balancing exercise. And what you do here is you first think of all of the qualities that you can about yourself. And what I recommend is that you sit down and kind of like in stream of consciousness writing, you write down every quality you think that you have, maybe things that others have told you about yourself, making sure to write down both positive and negative qualities. Okay, so after a while, you're going to have a nice list. And if you're having trouble with it, I would recommend maybe go to someone and ask them, what are some of the qualities that they see in you, if that might help you, get started. So once you have this list made, then you want to go in and you want to see which element each of these qualities would be connected to. So obviously there's many qualities in the world, and so I just took a few minutes and I put together some cards. So for example, like with the water element, it is adaptable, changeable, compassionate, sensitive, melancholic, pessimistic, and can be stagnant. So these are only some qualities, but this just gives you an idea of what qualities would be considered water. And if we're looking at the fire element, we have fire being energetic, and people with a lot of fire tend to be very motivated, dynamic, maybe combative, willful, destructive, and violent. So see, there's even, and maybe some anger in there too. So there's some negativity as well as positive qualities to all of the elements. As far as the element of air, there's a creative energy here, artistic, intelligent, verbal, but can also be a bit flighty, distracted, and paranoid. And then for earth, I came up with strength, endurance, steadfastness, but also some stubbornness, laziness, and then maybe domineering. Okay, so again, these are not all the qualities that go with these different elements, but it gets you an idea of how I'm kind of putting these into different categories, right? So if you're having trouble, let's say you've already got your list done, but you're having trouble figuring out where to, how to categorize them, you can always go online, do a little internet search, what qualities are connected to what elements, or what element is connected to this quality. And you can also, and never be afraid to do this, use your intuition. So if your intuition tells you a certain quality is connected to fire, then go with it, okay? So once you've made your list, then just like when we're tallying up those astrological elements, we want to do that here as well. So you want to tally it up and you want to see, do you have a lot of fire? Do you have a lot of air? Maybe you don't have much earth. So you just want to look across this. You want to see how balanced this is. Now, I don't want you to get too upset or worried if you don't find a lot of balance there, because we are pretty imbalanced people. We're not actually, like I said before, especially with the astrological, we come into this world, we can't do anything about our astrological chart once we're here. We've been born on that specific date. But what all of this does is it gives us kind of an idea of where would we strive for balance. If we wanted balance, what element would we go to first, right? So I know immediately earth. Earth is the one I'm going to go to first if I just sense an overall imbalance in myself, because I already know through all my exercises that I've done here that I have that a bit of lack of earth, right? So that is elemental balance. And then again, you want to look at it once you kind of determine, like for me, earth is the one that I lack. What can I do to bring in more earth? So lately I've been doing a lot of hiking in the mountains. I crave it. I daydream about it all the time. And so I know that's me. It's my body. It's my spirit that is just craving to get that earth element, to have more of that earth element, and probably is craving overall balance. So you could look at it that way too. So if there's something that you particularly seem to be craving a lot of, an activity, foods, we're actually going to get into that in a moment, but these things are always indications of where we might need to be focusing our attempts at balance. Also to note that the elements are often balanced by their opposite. So if you have too much fire, the opposite of fire is water. And so balancing by bringing in more water can help bring some of the fire down, and vice versa. As far as earth goes, if there's too much earth, we can often bring in some air. Air is like more of a flighty element, and earth is more of a grounded and stable element. And so we got too much grounding, like perhaps maybe too much sleeping or too much, or just feeling like not motivated, not having a lot of energy, then we want to bring in some air, and that's going to, it's going to get things moving. So you're going to see this as a theme here throughout. It's oftentimes is the opposite of what we have is what's going to bring us the balance. So that brings me then to dosha balancing. So for a lot of you, this is probably new, and I love to talk about this, though. It doesn't come up often in witchy circles. But since anybody who's here, I know you guys are into, ways to heal and ways to find balance. And this is, after all, it's called Body, Mind, Witchcraft, right? Because we look at all these different aspects. So as a yoga teacher, in my advanced training, I did some advanced Ayurvedic work. So Ayurveda is the sister science of yoga, and we're not going to get into that here. It's a whole segment that I will be doing eventually. But for now, we're going to just talk about dosha. So dosha is a word that is used in Ayurveda. It translates to manifested state of being. So basically, there are these 3 doshas that make up all of the manifested creative energy in the world. So all this creative energy, it comes down and manifests down into these 3 types, these 3 doshas. And the doshas, in turn, are composed of elements, which is what really got me interested in it. Because for years, I've been teaching in my coven all about elements, right? And then all of a sudden, here is another elemental system. So it really got me excited when I started to learn about this. So there are these 3 doshas, kapha, pitta, and vata. And the kapha dosha is made up of the elements of earth and water. The pitta element, or the pitta dosha, is made up of the elements of fire and water, and the vata dosha is made up of air and ether. Now the translation for ether in a witchy kind of sense would probably be spirit, or it's actually, the word is akasha, so sometimes you'll hear that word. So most people will have a combination of all 3 of these doshas. And in fact, everything in the world is a combination of these 3. But most of the time, you're going to have 1 or 2 that stand out dominant. So now, one thing is, if you want to know your own doshic composition, there are a lot of little quizzes online that you can take, and it will ask you all kinds of questions, and at the end it's going to tell you which dosha is the most prominent. I did mention I'm going to do a whole segment on this, so I will also be posting a quiz that you can take, or a little like a little inventory that you can take, and you can see for yourself which one yours is the prominent one. Once you know which dosha composition you are, you can then see which elemental composition you are. And this is where it gets interesting, because if you just like when we were talking about the elemental stuff earlier, the same thing happens here. If you have too much of one element, or you're too much of this one dosha, then you're going to want to balance it with the opposite, with something else. So for example, if you have, your body will actually give you signs of your imbalances. So let's say a lot of dry skin. This is something I always suffered from. And dry skin is a symptom of having the vata dosha a little bit out of balance, or maybe a lot out of balance, but at least out of balance. So there's other things like heartburn. So if we have heartburn, that can be a sign that we have the pitta dosha is running too high, or there's too much fire going on, right? Now, the thing about the doshas as well is that seasonally, there's a dosha for every season. So as we just naturally move through the wheel of the year, if we aren't pausing to balance ourselves, the theory behind this is that we don't move properly into the next season. And what can happen, so let's say like right now we're in summer, this is Pitta season. So it makes sense, Pitta is fire, so there's a lot of fire energy right now. So if we're not really balanced as we move into this season, sometimes people will start to have symptoms of having too much heat, too much Pitta energy. So maybe heartburn, just feeling naturally hot. And what do we naturally do when we're hot? We reach for something cooling. So that right there shows us that when we want to balance out that heated Pitta dosha, we want to bring in something cooling, whether it's food or different practices. So our goal here with this, with all of the different systems, is to somehow figure out what our body is telling us and showing us about where the excesses are so that we can then try to achieve some kind of balance. So let me see here if there's anything I missed with the doshas. So a lot of this is done through diet. In Ayurveda, it is very diet-centric. So, and by that I don't mean going on a diet, but looking at what we're actually consuming. And that can go for food, but it can also go for things that we're drinking and things that are in the environment. So when we consume, it can be anything. It doesn't just have to be food and drink. So we want to look at what we are consuming, and then we will make changes with that, and that will help balance out these elemental compositions inside of us, or these doshas, and these doshas. So, for example, high Pitta, we have too much heat. We want to bring in cooling practices. So like there are breathing practices we can bring in. Too much Vata, we tend to possibly need some more grounding. Vata is very scattered, it's very airy, so we want something that's going to be more grounding. So foods that have fat in them are really good when we're experiencing too much Vata. Or if we've got too much Kapha, that tends to be really stable, but if we feel like we have too much of that, then we need more movement. So this is where it really is important when you see someone who's kind of offering a one-size-fits-all solution to problems, because if we don't really understand our own elemental compositions, we're liable to jump on the bandwagon, and what works for some people doesn't work for all of us because of the way that we're uniquely made. So the goal here, we want to create, harmony within ourselves and within the elements, and that is what empowers us. So another thing that is really fascinating to me about the doshas is that I've seen connections between the doshas and how people's elements kind of lay out according to those, and between their astrological elemental compositions. And in fact, I did this in my coven. I taught a class on an introduction to Ayurveda and the doshas from a witchy perspective. And I taught this, I think, last February. And so everybody in the group, they knew their astrological charts. And so we spent some time and we figured out what everyone's dosha was. And then we looked at what everybody's astrological elemental breakdown was. And we found a lot of similarities. So for myself, like I've already told you, I have low earth from my astrological composition, and I also am a Pitta Vata, which means I don't have Kapha, and that is the earth element. So it's really interesting to kind of look at the connections and similarities between the two systems. So moving on, because there's quite a bit left to talk about, but just remember, I will go back and I would love to do a whole segment just on the doshas for those who are interested. So the next thing is chakra balancing. It really does go hand in hand with the elemental balancing. We have three main nadis, which are energy channels in the body. We have the sushumna, which is the central channel, goes up the spine. And then we have the ida and the pingala, which are the feminine and the masculine channels. Now they interweave around the sushumna, and they connect at the root chakra and at the third eye. So throughout the body and all along the sushumna, we have 7 major chakras. These are the energy centers that we refer to when we say chakras. And you'll hear people talk about these as, they'll say like, my root chakra is closed. And I just want to say that, from most teachers that I have found, they teach that there really isn't this closing of a chakra. We don't really have a closed energetic center, but what we might have is we might have imbalances here, which is almost like, I've talked about this before, but you threw a rock into a stream, the water is still moving, but it changes the pattern of how the water moves. That's what we're talking about when we say these chakras are blocked. It's really that they are, the energy isn't moving optimally through them. So when we are working to balance the chakras, what we want to do is we want to get all these energy centers open, flowing, all the energy flowing properly, everything working optimally, and that is how we create the balance in the chakra system. So we can work with the system as a whole, or we can look at individual chakras that seem to be out of balance, and most of the time your body will give you a clue. So just like with that doshic system, when I said your body will give you symptoms like heartburn or dryness or allergies or different things like that, with the chakra system, anytime that you have a discomfort or a pain in a part of the body, it's usually an indication that that is a center that needs to be worked on. So neck pain would indicate the throat chakra. Now or headaches, might indicate the third eye. Indigestion would indicate the solar plexus. Now those are physical symptoms, but there are also emotional symptoms that we can look at as well. So, anger, excessive anger might be too much fire. So again, that might be in the solar plexus. If we're having a lot of fears or anxiety, that's usually something down in the root chakra that needs work. So if lack of self-confidence or having a lot of self-doubt, that might be in the solar plexus. So we're looking at all of these symptoms that we have, and we're using them as feedback. Our body is constantly telling us what needs to be worked on if we want to listen to it. And we don't listen to it, then that is how a lot of illness is created. And that is a whole other class. But at least with the chakras, they can be used to tell us through which ways we can heal or we can balance. Now the chakras also are tied to elements. At least the bottom ones are. The upper ones, they tend to be tied to things that we wouldn't really consider elemental probably, but the root is tied to the element of earth. The sacral chakra, which is a little bit below the navel, that's tied to the element of water. The solar plexus, which is right above the navel, is tied to fire, and then the heart chakra is tied to air. So again, you can see, like, if one of these chakras felt like it was out of balance and needed some work, you could then look at the element that's associated with it, and then now you have all these ideas of practices that you could do to find some balance. Now, something that is connected to this is yin-yang balancing. So the yin and the yang energy within us is a feminine and a masculine energy that's within all things, and it has nothing to do with gender, whatever gender we consider ourselves or no gender at all. Everybody has a composition of this yin and this yang energy. And we want, again, to try to balance this. So you've seen, the yin and the yang. There's always, within the black, there's white, and within the white, there's black. So there's a piece of the opposite that's always contained within one side of it, right? So this is a sign to us that the opposite is usually what we use to heal. So this is a theme that we're seeing a lot here. So with the yin and the yang, if we have too much yang, or this masculine energy, it tends to be more activating, more fiery, or the yin energy, which tends to be more receptive, more receiving, cooler. If we have an imbalance of either one of these, it's the opposite that helps us brings us out of that imbalance. So it's also important as witches to consider what part of the cycles that we're in, because the cycles also have yin and yang energy. So right now we're in the waning moon. This is yin energy. So you've probably heard me talk about this a lot, is when we come into the waning moon, we want to be careful about our energy. We want to make sure that we are being aware of the fact that the energy is waning down, and it's inviting us to go a little slower, turn inward, do some more of this emotional work. As opposed to when we're in the waxing moon, we have that more activating yang energy that's asking us to turn outward, do stuff, plan things, get things going. So we just want to be mindful of our energy in the different parts of the cycle that we're in. So I was going to teach us a little breath work routine, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and do it here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. There is a video on my YouTube that shows this. I think it shows it for about 5 minutes or something, so it's a little bit longer. So this breath is called Nadi Shodhana, and it is the double nostril breathing. It's an awesome breath that can be used to balance the yin and the yang energy. And so when we are breathing from our left nostril, this is associated with the yin energy, that more feminine energy. It's also going to be associated with the Ida, that feminine energy channel in the body. And then when we're breathing through the right nostril, that's going to be associated with the yang energy, or that Pingala, which is the masculine energy channel. Okay, so remember I said that those two energy channels, they interweave around the main channel, the Sushumna, and they meet in two places. They meet in the root when they start, and they meet again in the third eye. And so this breath is used, essentially it can be used to connect the root and the third eye, but it can also be used to find balance. Okay, so what we're going to do is take your thumb, you're going to place it lightly on the right nostril, and then typically you're going to place your ring finger on the left nostril. Now your pinky can also go on the left nostril, or some people find it's more comfortable to just kind of let it hang. And then the pointer and the middle finger are right here on the third eye. That reminds us that we're actually connecting the third eye here as well. So you're going to breathe normally for a few breaths until you're ready. And then what you'll do is you're going to lightly press down with your thumb onto the right nostril. So you're going to block the right nostril and breathe only through the left nostril. So it's going to look like this. And then, as soon as you get to the top of the breath, close off the left nostril with the ring finger, open up the right nostril, and now you're going to exhale through the right nostril. So it'll look like that. Now, keeping the left nostril closed, you're going to breathe in again through the right nostril. Then close that one, open up the left nostril, and exhale. So basically what we're doing throughout this whole breath is we're breathing in through one nostril, closing it off, exhaling through the opposite one, then breathing in through that same one, the opposite one, right? And then closing that, and then exhaling through the other one. So let me say that again, get a little confusing. But so we breathe in through the left, close it off, exhale through the right. Then you breathe in through the right, close that off, exhale through the left. And then it would start all over again. Breathe in through the left, close off the left nostril, breathe out through the right. Breathe in through the right, close off the right nostril, breathe out through the left. And you go through this cycle, and you can do that, like I said on the YouTube video, I think I do it for 3 or 4 minutes. It's usually recommended to do it about that time, and this breath will immediately begin to balance the yin and the yang energy in you. So another thing with the breath though is if instead, let's say you realize I've got too much yang energy, I'm too heated up, I need to cool down, what you can do is just close off the right nostril and just breathe in and out through the left. This will bring you into a yin state and will lower your energy. It's really good if you're feeling activated before bed and you need to calm down or cool down. You can always just close off the right, breathe in and out through the left. Now, if instead you need to bring in some more yang energy, let's say you're having trouble getting up, getting motivated, then you can just close off the left nostril and breathe in and out through the right. That will be activating the yang circuit, and therefore you'll have more activating energy. So like all the exercises, try it out, and if it works for you, awesome. If not, it's not everything's for everyone, but it is a really good exercise we can use to balance those two halves of us. All right, so I'm just checking. I don't have any questions coming in through the live here right now. So I'm just going to talk for a few more minutes, finish up what I had for us, and then we'll be out of here. So the last thing I really wanted to talk about was lifestyle balance. So this is really about how am I spending my time? My time is energy, and while time is theoretical, it is a construct of the human mind, and also there is a reality to it. The world does move through time, and because we have created time as humans, we do live in a world that has time. So we really want to think about, like, how are we using this resource of time? Are we using it wisely? And how are we spending it? Are we spending it on things that fill us up, that are for the higher good? Or are we spending a lot of it on things that aren't for our higher good? So one way that we can, work with this visually is through a life balance wheel. I'm going to go ahead and post an example of one in the group. If not tonight, I'll post it in tomorrow. And it's very simple. You just look at different categories. It's like a little wheel with little pie slices cut out. And one part is for relationships, one part for family, higher spiritual goals, health, work, career, money, all the different things that you can think about that would be pie pieces of your life. They're all there in that circle. And then you go through and you rate where you are in each of these pie pieces. It will give you an idea of how balanced your time is and how balanced your energy is. So that's a neat little exercise you can do. If you find that there's too much work going on, obviously we balance that with the opposite, which is more play. If we're having too much fun and not enough work and the bills aren't getting paid, then obviously we have to balance that with a little bit more work. If instead we're spending too much time on the mundane stuff, maybe we need to look more towards the spiritual. So the wheel is really neat because you can look at it and very quickly, visually, see how balanced your time seems to be. So that brings me to the end here, and I just wanted to mention the whole point of why I even created the group in the first place is I felt that there's a lot of groups out there. They teach the fundamentals of witchcraft, and I wanted this to be a space that was a little bit different. Because of my background in psychology and astrology, I really spent a lot of time studying practices that fill up the body and in the mind, and then we blend that with the spirit. And because we really can't just work on the spiritual and let the other two pieces go, right? We want to work on it as a whole, and that's really what I created this group for. Because we know that these pieces are so interconnected that when we get them all balanced and make sure that we're really spending care and time looking at the different aspects of ourselves, that's when we really tap into our true magical abilities. I'll share more of my story later about what I did to really supercharge my practices, but a lot of it has to do with some of these things I'm teaching you. Now, I do want to mention, one thing is, if you look at all these things I kind of talked about tonight, there is this common theme there that when we have an excess of something, we can often balance it with the opposite. And one thing, just for your consideration, is, when you see a theme that seems to run throughout a bunch of different systems, it's usually a good indication that we have found some kind of a universal truth. So while the systems all have their differences, they have a lot in common. It shows us that maybe there is a universal truth here, that the lack of one thing can be balanced through its opposite. So I just leave that kind of as a parting thought there. So let's just see that no more questions here. So I am just going to end by giving you a little heads up about what's going on. So I do have the Witch's Guide to Shadow Work is out now. If you haven't gotten your copy, it's a free download that everybody can get. And I'll post another link for it in the group. So if you haven't gotten yours yet, you can get that. And I just wanted to mention that I have a new membership group starting. I am going to let everybody know. I'll be making that announcement very soon. I have a limited number of spots available for this. It's as we launch it, and we're going to be starting with a shadow working module. So it's a really awesome group. It's a way that you can, get into this and work with me and some other people who want to work at, the same things that you want to work at in kind of a little smaller setting. And what my plan is that we'll start with some shadow work. We're in the perfect time of the year as we move into the fall. This is the perfect time for shadow work. And then from there, the group will vote on what's the next thing that we want to work on. So we can work on chakras, we can work on elemental balancing, we can work on energy work, we can work on all kinds of things, and the group will kind of steer where we go next from that. So as far as the shadow working goes, we have a lot of awesome things planned. Like every month in the group, there will be a ritual, and there will also be a workshop that will go along a certain theme, and then there will be some different practices that you can do throughout the month. We'll have a Q&A in the group so everybody can get individualized help on what they're working on. So it's just a lot of great stuff, and I'm just so excited to finally be unveiling it and being able to bring it to you guys. And I want everybody in the group to be, the first ones who get a chance to join. Other than that, Lunaza, the first harvest festival in the Wheel of the Year, is coming up. It comes up on August 1st, and I'm going to be doing a Lakshmi abundance ritual. So look forward to that. I'll be posting in the group about how you can attend. It'll be on Zoom, but there's also a recording, so anybody who signs up for that, it's by donation only, but you can donate $1 and get in. And you can come to that live, or you can watch the video later. It's going to be an awesome ritual, so I really hope you can come. And on that note, since it is Lunaza, Lunaza is the first of the the first of the harvest holidays of the Wheel of the Year. This is where we start, harvesting the grain, but metaphorically, this is the time when the energy of the world is open for abundance. So on that note, my money magic course that I opened up a few months ago, we're going to have a little discount on it. So I'm going to put that out there too. So if anybody's interested in learning about how you can work with abundant energy, you can get this little class, and it will teach you everything you need to know. And there's so much in it. There's a ritual. There's yoga, there's meditation, there's energy, breathwork practices, there's all kinds of stuff. So it's really, really cool. And I will post that soon. Okay. All right, so I have gone over a little bit, but that was a lot to cover in a little bit of time. And like always, I'm just so blessed and so grateful to have you all here. And I hope you have a great day. Until next time, blessed be.